Welcome to my channel. I'm Nural and I'm here with another analog photography video. Up until now, I talked about different film formats and how to select between them and also different film development techniques, but I never really gotten much into the technical aspect of cameras. So if you're curious about what aperture is or how to select the film ISO speed, then this video is for you. Let's get started. So I have a couple cameras out here that I'm gonna be using to show you the settings from, and actually these settings change from camera to camera. So like I have the single-use camera which has no settings at all. So what you do is you just press the shutter and wind your film and that's it. You cannot select anything else in this one. Whereas I have the Diana Mini or the Sprocket Rocket where you have these N and B settings up here and some cloudy, partly cloudy, sunny signs down here, and also something else that moves. So this ring that moves. And so those are some settings. And a camera like LCA, it has some settings here and it has a dial here, but nothing else that seems, some lights. And I have my Leica, which has the B here but no N, but different numbers, and also some numbers here and inside too. So what do all these mean? Well, let's see. So the first thing I want to start with is the film speed, the ISO or ASA as they call it, because like I said, this one has no settings, so you have to depend on your film to make a proper exposure. And the film speeds or ISO speeds change between 100, there's 200, there is 100 to 400 and also 100 here. This one is a more rare film, so it has 80. And these numbers are actually representative of the film's sensitivity to film. And the smaller the number is, the more light your film needs from outside. So what this means is if I'm using the 80 ISO or ASA Perenia P30, then I need to shoot this either in a bright light situation or set my other settings accordingly so that my camera gets enough light for this film to expose properly. Whereas if I'm outside at night and want to shoot a night scene, then I can go for something like a 800 or a 1600 ISO film so that the film gets more light in a shorter amount of time. And they range mostly between 100, 200, 400, and 800. And you can also find 80, 50, 25 or 1600, 3200. And those two ends are more rare, and actually the film prices also change. The higher the ISO, the more expensive the film, and also if it's color negative or X-Pro, but that's not our deal today. One thing that the film affects is, along with the ISO affecting how much light it needs, it also affects the graininess of the photograph. So if, and by graininess, I mean sort of like sandy, dusty view to it. So the higher the ISO, the grainy the photo is, because the distance between the crystal halides, silver halides, change with the ISO, and that makes the film more grainy towards the faster films. And if you want a more clear, smooth image, then a lower ISO film might be better for you, and then you need to make sure that the other settings are correct. But the first thing to choose in analog photography, in my opinion, is which film you want to use, and then look at the settings in your camera. So let's look at the settings as well. So the first camera setting, not the film setting, that I want to talk about is the aperture. And the aperture here we have, I'm not sure if it's in focus, but we have cloudy, partly cloudy, sunny, and P. And in here we have cloudy and sunny, which are simplified versions of the aperture settings, because the actual aperture settings are f-stops and they shift between different numbers. So here, like in this Rusar Plus lens, I have from 5.6 to 22. So what that does is this affects the amount of light that enters through a hole inside your camera, and this affects the size of the hole. So if I can turn this around. So now there's a hole in there and it is at 22, so it's pretty small. And as I shift it towards 5.6, the hole gets bigger. And this has more like a seamless leaf structure. So the larger the aperture hole, the smaller the number is, the more light that your camera lets through. Okay, that was wrong. And so if I'm shooting inside at night, then I need to use an open aperture with a smaller number. And if I'm shooting sunny in a beach, then of course I need a smaller hole. So since it's bright outside, less light gets in. And this has a similar structure. And here I again have it open. So this is the largest opening in the Diana. So I have this, and this one you don't even see, it's just the size of a pinhole, which is the pinhole mode. And as I said, that affects the size of the hole that lets in the light. But as with the film speed and graininess, this also has a second side where it affects the area of focus in your film. So if you use an F setting like 22 or pinhole, which is really a small hole, then everything in your photo will be in focus. So from like 0 to infinity, everything will be in focus. But if you use something like 2 let's see what this one has, 2.8 or 4 or 5.6, then what you focus on your camera and the background will be blurry. So you will have a more crisp foreground or vice versa. So the background will be in focus and the other side will be more blurry. So it affects the depth of the depth field in your camera, basically, or in your photo. So if you want your if you're taking a portrait and you want the person to be in real focus and the background to be just blurry, then go for something like 2.8, 4, or 5.6. Whereas if you're shooting an architecture and you want everything to be in focus, then go for something like 16 or 22. And as I said, this is the size of the hole. And but about time, so let's see how the time is affected. The time that the light enters your camera is called shutter speed. And this has stable shutter speed, so it's just opens and closes automatically. You can't adjust it. Whereas these two, as I showed before, have N and B. And when I was showing you the apertures on this one, I was actually holding it in B, which is bulb, which is long exposure. So as long as I press this down, the inside curtain of the camera stays open and light gets in. Whereas in N, I don't know if it will be too visible, but I'll try to do it anyways. Okay. So it just, okay, you don't really see it, but it just opens and closes basically real fast. And this one is 1/60th of a second, and Sprocket Rocket does it in 1/80th of a second. And these are more, again, simplified versions, so you have two settings. Whereas with the Leica, I have here a bunch of numbers. And what those numbers are they're fractions of seconds. So I can select between 1,000th of a second, which is like less than the blink of an eye. And what I use the most is like one 250th of a second, or 125th of a second, if I'm saying those correctly. And then you have like 1/8 of a second, half of a second, 1 second, and bulb again. And this, as I said, affects the time that the curtain stays open and light enters your camera. And as with the other two settings, this also has like a double-sided thing to it, because of course you need to select it based on the light conditions. So if like I'm indoors and it's dark, then of course I need to have longer shutter speed setting and allowing my camera to get more light from the room. But if I'm at the beach, then it has to be real quick so that not too much light enters the camera and my photo doesn't turn up too bright. But the other side of this is again, focus on your photo, because if you're shooting a horse race and if you want the horses to be like really crisp and in focus, then you have to have a real quick shutter speed so that when you press it, it just opens and closes real fast and the horse is just captured in that moment. Whereas if you want to see the horse running, then you have to have a slower shutter speed. So the longer the curtain stays open, the movement enters the camera and you have movement captured on your photo. And that is how light paintings are done. So when you do a light painting with an analog camera, you set it to B, and then you draw something with a light source like a sprinkler or a flashlight or fire something, I don't know, some sort of light source, and you stand in front of the camera and draw something, and as the curtain stays open during that time, you end up drawing something onto your photo. And so, like I said, it depends on how crisp or movement in your photo you want. Okay, and that's another setting that you need to be aware of. And one final setting you need to be aware of is the actual focus. And again, this doesn't have it. This one has here, it says 0.6 meters to 1 meter, and it has the image of a flower. And here we have 1 meter to infinity, and it has the image of a person standing in front of a mountain. And what this is when I set it to less than 1 meter, so the flower side, and I take a photo, then things that are less than 1 meter in distance between my camera will be in focus, whereas the background will be blurry. So like if I'm shooting a flower and then I lean in close, then that will be in focus. Whereas I'm shooting a group of friends and I need to step back further than 1 meter, then I set it to this side. And when I take the photo, my friends who are standing farther than 1 meter away will be in focus. And what happens if I do vice versa? So if I forget it in 1 meter and shoot a close-up flower, it will be blurry. And if I did the other thing, forgot it in the flower mode and shoot my friends, they will be blurry. And the fun thing about it is this viewfinder is not connected with the lens at all, so you don't see what you're focusing on. And it is essentially the same with the Diana, where you change that setting from here. And also again with the LCA, where you have here like 80 centimeters, 1.5 meters, 3 meters, and infinity. So you set it from here, but you don't see if you're in focus. And if you own a camera like that, then you need to think of the distance and calculate it yourself. Either have sort of like a meter with you, if that's possible. Some of the lomography straps have that option. So the inside is a meter printed. And wow, my cat is scratching the table. Anyways, and another option is after some time you actually become more confident with it, so you can actually guess your distance, and so it becomes easier. And this also has the settings here. And this has actually more settings. So it has like 12 meters, 6 meters, 4 meters, 3 meters, 2.5 meters, and it goes all the way up to 50 centimeters. But it is again not connected to the viewfinder here, so I don't see where my focus is. Again, I need to guess with this lens as well. Whereas some Nikons and Canons and Olympus cameras and some different ones, actually you can see where you're focusing on in the lens itself or from the viewfinder when you look. And one lens I own like that is the Minitar, again from lomography, that I use with my LCA. And with this I can again, the focusing ring is here, and it is exactly the same as the Lomo LCA, because this is the LCA lenses remake for M mount. And here I can actually set it quite fast by changing. But when I put this onto my camera and look through the viewfinder, I actually see two images. And what I need to do is make sure that they line up with one another so that my photo will be in focus. So when I look through the viewfinder, I actually see what I'm focusing on. And if you have a camera like this, easier, or well, depending on you, because I'm not really great with focusing as I'm really used to this one, but these are all options. Okay, so I talked about all the settings. I told you about the film ISO speed, aperture setting, shutter speed setting, and focusing on your camera. And then what? Well, go ahead and shoot. But like really, so what you need to do in order to get a good exposed photo is make sure that the combination of all these settings are correct. So if I have like 100 ISO film and I'm out in the sun, then I need to set my aperture and shutter speed accordingly. Or if I want the foreground to be crisp and the background to be blurry, then I need to select an open aperture with a faster shutter speed, and vice versa. So it all depends on the end result that I want, but essentially the combination of these helps me produce a good exposed photo. And for me, what I find easy is, well, if I'm using the LCA, life is quite easy, because if I put 100 ISO film, I set this to 100, and then like the camera does the work itself. So it opens and closes according to the film speed and light. So I don't need to do anything else. And if you have an automatic camera, then it's going to be a similar experience for you. But when I'm using my Leica, which has more settings, I get the help of a light meter. And I don't own a light meter, but I have an app on my iPhone, and I'm going to show you the screen now. And in this app, what I do is I select the film speed and one of my other settings, either the shutter speed or the aperture. And then the app suggests what I should set for the third setting. So it helps me along the way, which is kind of nice. This is all I'm going to be talking about today. So if you have any questions about any of the camera settings or anything else in general, just drop me a line in the comments and I'll get back to you. And while you're at it, if you haven't done so, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button so you don't miss any of my new videos. And I'll see you next week. Bye.